Meet Reed Lance Rosenthal, rancher, #1 best-selling, award-winning author, and unabashedly, unapologetically on the right side of the outstanding issues of our generation. But don't try to fence him in. Sometimes his positions will surprise you, because Reed is definitely his own man, with his own opinions. You might love him, you might hate him, but you won't be able to stop listening. Step over to the right side with Reed.
Howdy, listeners and viewers, coast to coast, the Gulf to Canada, and around the globe. Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take on all those video channels out there. Brighteon, Patreon, Gab, Truth, YouTube, Rumble, you name it. We are there. Please subscribe, hit the like, hit the bell. That'll let you know when these diatribes, visual diatribes, come your way. And I'm getting close to 2 a week. This is, I'm recording this on a Friday. You folks will probably see it either tonight, Friday night, or tomorrow. I wanted to get it out Tuesday, but, and this will tie into the ranch story. There was good weather, a break in the weather. We had snow before, and we have snow coming, I hope, because it's dry. We'll talk about that. And I had to focus on doing stuff, particularly since I've been without a ranch lieutenant, which is a situation also hopefully in the process of resolution. What we're going to talk about today, and once again, I'm shooting to keep these shows to 20 to 30 minutes because people seem to like that better than my longer rants and raves. But what we're going to talk about today is the judiciary. Specifically, the United States federal system, the district courts. You know, the district court judges, virtually all of them appointed by Obama. Wow, what a surprise. And allowed to get into their lifetime positions by rhinos who went, oh, well, you know, he's the president. He gets to have a choice of who he puts in there. Right. I don't think that that empathy is extended by the other side when the situation is reversed. What do you think? And Don Jr. kind of summed up the rhinos perfectly. This was yesterday. I'll have the article on therightsideradio.com. It's pretty good. He basically called the Republican senators in Congress who go along with the Democrats because of the touchy-feely kumbaya stuff pussies. You know? Don Jr., you're right on. You're right on. And it has to stop. But putting that to the side, let's talk about how these district courts were established. And did you know they were established by Congress and therefore they can be disestablished or regulated by Congress, despite, of course, the howls of the left, as you can imagine, right? And then I have a whole list of things that are going on in the world that, you know, la-di-da-di-da, the mainstream media isn't saying a word about. And you know what? Not a lot of alternative media is saying a lot about. But things are shaping up to be dicey. I'll be nice. And if we have time today, and if we don't, it will be in the next video, which, by the way, will be within the next 72 hours. We actually have weather coming in, so I won't have to feel guilty about being inside in the little studio talking to you folks, and thank you very much for listening. I love all you guys. Rather than being out trying to move what water there is this year, and there's not much. But all these things I'm going to talk about today on the international side, and the bubbling tensions which are beginning to kind of froth over the pot. You know, when you boil rice at too high a temperature, it comes out over the edge and gets all over your stove. Kind of one of those deals. That leads us to an alternative thesis. I am open-minded. I really am. I mean, I'm set on my principles, and I'm set on my core beliefs, but I'm open-minded to facts. I'm open-minded to the dots, and I'm open-minded how the dots connect, whether it's good, bad, or ugly for quote-unquote our side. It is what it is. I was trained as a journalist. Okay, you follow the facts to find the story, not construct the facts to create the story, as we have all seen far too many times here over the last 20 years. But there is an alternative scenario to the one that I have been talking about the last 6, 7, 8 weeks, which is a big grand deal between Russia, China, and the United States, each with their sphere of influence, living in kind of uneasy, peaceful coexistence. China kind of running Asia and the South Pacific, Russia, Eurasia, and, too bad for you, Europe, and America, the Western Hemisphere, South America, North America, the poles, Greenland, etc. There's a whole nother scenario, which is not so pleasant. And we need to talk about it because it's a possibility. If I get to that today, great. I'm not going to go over the 25 to 30 minutes. If I don't, you're going to hear about it. Your foundation will be today. And the other stuff, which I won't have time to talk about today. You'll have the foundation, and then we can get into the potential, shall we say, the kind of horrific potential, actually. So, I'll tell you what. Let's start off with a founder's quote. This is perfect because, we're dealing with some judges that are unbelievable. This is Thomas Jefferson. A judiciary independent of a king or executive alone is a good thing, but the independence of the will of a nation is a solecism, at least in a Republican government. And that, folks, sums up exactly what we're seeing now. Let me just take two for instances, which kind of drives home Jefferson's quote. So we have Judge Boasberg. Judge Boasberg is a Trump deranged person. Never mind that he's a judge. If he wasn't a judge, he'd be a Trump deranged person. Both his daughters are major fundraisers and heavily involved in the Democratic Party. He is a major donor to the Democratic Party. This is unbelievable. He attended a seminar prior to taking on this case, which was about quote unquote other things, but was populated with folks like him, Trump deranged, high level, elite Democrats. And he had fun for 4 days talking with all these people about how bad the Orange Man was and his policies and the poor illegal immigrants and blah, 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 whatever those folks like to yak about as they drink their tea. Here's the real killer. Do you know who approved the illegal, flatly illegal, outside the law at the time of approval, black and white? Do you know who approved the 4 FISA warrants against Trump in the Russia hoax? That's right, Judge Boasberg. And this judge isn't even honest enough to recuse himself from this case. And now he's been given another case because the Democrats are really good at shopping for Obama disciples who happen to wear black robes. The Hegseth case, the whole furor over the Signal deal, which, by the way, be quite honest with you, let's call a spade a spade. It's reprehensible. Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, Mike Walsh, these are top people in our government when it comes to national security, and they should friggin' know better. I mean, what were they thinking? And I don't want to hear about, Hillary bleached her computer and she had her hard drive in her bathroom. Yeah, that's right. And that was intentional and it was ongoing and it wasn't a one-off, and we can go on and on. But you know what? What the Trump folks did was really unthinking and really kind of unforgivable, even though no harm came from it, even though the mission, which was against the Houthis, came off without a flaw, exactly as planned. They really need to think a little bit. And hopefully this is shall we say, a glass of lemonade from which a lemon will be made. No pun intended, no run on words there. And they will not do this again, because next time it could have disastrous consequences. But the Democrats, quick to pick up on this, particularly with the upcoming special elections. That's next week, folks. We're going to talk about it in just a minute. And they filed a lawsuit, because they're so concerned about national security and America being great, and it really is unbelievable. They filed a lawsuit. Pete Hegseth is kind of their star bad boy in the lawsuit. And the lawsuit is they filed it in Judge Boasberg's court. Wow. Boasberg, by the way, is the guy who ruled against Trump in the deportation of the Tren de Agua thugs from Venezuela to the El Salvador prison. Just so you can tie in all these cases, because we wouldn't want to export designated terrorists from the United States. No, let's keep them here. Perfect. They're so warm and fuzzy and cuddly. All right. The other judge it's just these two of about 9. All of which but one is an Obama appointee. The other one is a Clinton appointee. The other judge, his name is Chuang. He's a professor, he's a high mucky muck at Harvard. So that will kind of tell you where he comes from, right? And he decided that the President of the United States does not have the authority to dismantle agencies like USAID. That's what the case was about. And we know what a cesspool that's been exposed to be. And he was just slapped down by the Court of Appeals, but only temporarily. In fact, sometime over the weekend, they're going to rule whether their slap down of Judge Chuang is permanent or temporary, or goes back to the trial court, which is Judge Chuang at the United States District Court, or whatever. But these judges are playing politics, and they are creating a solecism, right? In other words, it's a what I think, not what the country wants, needs, or according to the law theory. There's other lawsuits running around. The Alien Act of 1998, the Enemy Alien Act. And I can go on and on. I'm not going to bore you with it. We're really talking about a judiciary here, okay? And in a moment, after the ranch story, we're going to get into how the federal district courts got established and some of the things that Congress might do to, shall we say, make their establishment less secure. How's that? Okay, now for the ranch story. So it is a dry bone out here. Dry. Now, we have great water on the ranch, really some of the best for 50, maybe 100 miles in any direction because of all the capital improvements we've done over the last 20 years, including reservoirs to store water, disperse water over the terrace fields, etc. So we're in better shape than most, but let me tell you, even on this place, it is bone dry. Ponds, which should be going over their spillways right now, which is kind of free water, it doesn't have to go through the normal outlet system, and you can use it here in the early season. There isn't any. There's one field we call the summer field. Normally, we get 12 to 20 days of really good water. We douse the hell out of those fields up there, the north field and the south field and the summer pasture. Not this year. This year, and I'm going to have to go up there, believe it or not, after this show and check it tonight and keep my fingers crossed that maybe it was just temporary. But the water flow was great for 2 days and is now dwindled to where it's not even getting to the level in the ditches to get out the sets. It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. And that the reservoirs are not full, at least full. Never mind coming over the spillways, so we can use that water kind of in advance of the normal irrigation pattern, is really scary. And there's a big reservoir downstream of us. And that reservoir has been drained because there's a problem with the dam and they have to rebuild it, which means that the people downstream of us, I'm talking about 20, 30 miles, the people downstream of us are literally without any water, none, zero, nada. And they're going to be that way until 2029 when the government says they'll have the new dam built. Well, what do you want to bet? It won't be 2029. So think about all those poor ranchers and farmers further outside the mountains and out into the plains who are not going to have water for 5 years. Not a drop. This is kind of a big disaster, but I'll keep you informed. It's a disaster, but it's fascinating in the way it's unfolding. And there's all sorts of water law at play, including Nebraska being able to make a call on the Platte River in Wyoming, which will affect everybody who is on a tributary of the Platte River, which we are. So I don't have any moral to the story for you other than to say the unexpected will occur. And sometimes the unexpected can remain mysterious and undefined for way longer than a day or two. All right, let's talk about the court system here. The United States Federal District Court System. So at the Constitutional Convention of 1787, the delegates, they fought over everything, but they were divided over whether the nation should have federal courts below a Supreme Court or just the Supreme Court, and the states should handle everything else. As you can imagine, the Federalists, kind of led by John Adams and George Washington, not to Washington's credit, advocated a strong federal government and therefore a federal court system. The Republicans, led by Jefferson and his group, advocated state rights and a weak central government with no court system other than a Supreme Court, which in the end would have the yay or nay over whatever the state courts did. There was a Madisonian Compromise, that's what it was called, Madisonian Compromise, ensconced in the Constitution, Article 3, and it provided that the Constitution would create no inferior federal courts, but would instead allow Congress to decide what courts, if any, it might establish in the future. This is key. This is key. And a lot of people don't know it. In the Judiciary Act of 1789, 2 years later, Congress divided the nation into 13 judicial districts, 11 of which were in the eastern, middle, and southern circuits, which they also established. North Carolina and Rhode Island were outside this kind of judicial ball of wax because they had not yet ratified the Constitution. Therefore, they didn't get the vote. Novel concept. Kentucky and Maine comprised judicial districts also, but they were part of the other colonies, or at that time, the other states. So the act established, remember, because the Constitution gave Congress the right to establish this stuff, the act established that the U.S. Circuit Courts would be the primary trial courts, and the U.S. District Courts, below the Circuit Courts, would hear only admiralty and maritime, in other words, kind of laws of the sea type cases. The Circuit Courts did not have their own judges at that time, believe it or not. The Circuit Court system was actually conducted by the Supreme Court judges who literally rode their horses or their carriages to wherever the courts were being held to have the various trials out in the colonies. Really kind of fascinating. Article 3 extended the federal judicial power to all cases that arise under federal law, not state, federal law. Congress did not grant the lower federal courts, this is important, such jurisdiction in the 1789 Act, and by such jurisdiction, I'm talking about any other jurisdiction outside federal law, leaving that all to the state courts. So the Federalists They favored a strong national government. And the Republicans favored the opposite. And I guess you don't need to wonder about which side I would have been on had I been back there in that convention. In the anti-federalist tradition, the Republicans were really wary of centralized authority. Gee, I think rightly so, now that we see Boasberg and Wang and the rest of the crew here running amok in fits of solecism. In the 1790s, the competition between, at that time, the Jefferson group and the Adams administration, remember, Adams was president right before Jefferson was president, reached kind of a fever pitch. It really got to the point, if you think censorship is just new, folks, where literally the Adams administration was throwing Jeffersonians in jail under the Sedition Act of 1798, that they've prosecuted Trump on. Under the Sedition Act of 1798 for allegedly disloyal behavior. Okay. Well, the country didn't like that much, kind of like the last election. It's amazing how history kind of keeps rolling over, one at a time, and the same and the same. In the 1800 election, the Republicans kicked butt on the Federalists. And for the first time, political power in this young, very young republic changed hands from one party to another. The Federalists, who viewed the Republicans, does this sound familiar, as disloyal and seditious, the J6 types. They feared that Jefferson's ascension to the presidency would have implications for the federal judiciary. So right before Jefferson, while Adams was a lame duck, think about this and all the crap that Biden pulled in his last 60 days in office before Trump was sworn in. And Obama, who was really pulling, Biden was Obama's third term. And Obama, right before Trump's ascension to the office in 2016, did the same, okay? Landmines, ridiculous expenditures. I mean, you've heard about all that stuff. And one of the things that Adams did was push through Congress another law. And that law basically established the district courts. And they blamed it on the Supreme Court justices who were holding trials at the circuit court level, way out there in the country after much commuting and travel. They blamed it on them, that they had wanted this to happen. There's always a cloak for the real intent of the action, right? So in the closing days of the lame duck Adams presidency, the Federalist majority passed the Judiciary Act of 1801. The act reduced the size of the Supreme Court from 6 justices to 5 justices, abolished all the circuits that had been set up, and replaced them with 6 numbered quote-unquote circuits with appointed judges. The beginnings of the district court system. The act also created within these circuits 16 additional circuit court judgeships. And it made significant changes to the federal court jurisdiction, right? Before it had been limited to federal law. But instead, the federal courts were made much more powerful in these last days of the Adams administration. We're dealing with it right now, folks. And gave the courts kind of an expanded judicial role. Section 11 of the Act provided the circuit courts, really the district courts, with jurisdiction over all cases which arise under the Constitution, whether they were state or federal. I mean, a huge expansion of federal judicial power. And way above the limits set in Article 3 of the Constitution. In 1889, Congress finally provided a court for every judicial district. And this, should we say, ended the expanding jurisdiction of at least certain of the jurisdiction of the district courts. In the Judicial Code of 1911, Congress abolished the U.S. circuit courts that had been set up almost 100 years before and made the U.S. district courts, gave them their formal designation. Remember, the old circuit courts became the U.S. district courts. I mean, it's all the same animal, just different names. But the left never changes names on something to mask what it's doing, does it? I'm so surprised. And the U.S. district courts were given in 1911 the sole general jurisdiction of about anything other than at the appellate level, the appeals type litigation in the entire United States or over the entire United States, and just about everything that happens in the entire United States. As new states began to enter the Union, Congress created additional district courts to take care of those states and make sure those states were under the thumb of the federal judiciary. The United States District Court for New York, of course, New York, in 1812 became the very first in the nation with two judgeships, not one, two. And one of them was, come on, you guys have been listening, you've heard it a million times, the Southern District of New York. You know, where all the good stuff comes from. You know, all the anti-Trump, anti-Republican, anti-individual, pro-big government stuff comes from. And where there has been, as we have found, a rather corrupt tango, liaison between federal enforcement, a la the FBI, and the federal judiciary, i.e. the Southern District of New York and the U.S. attorneys there. Now that's getting cleaned up because the U.S. attorney was fired, as every president does, and there is now somebody who we hope has a living brain cell in there and thinks American. We shall see. So the United States District Court, now having two judgeships in New York, became kind of the, shall we say, the model for how they would expand the district courts in the future. And you'll notice that all populous states have now more than one judicial district with more than one district court. All the states without population have one. Wyoming has basically one district court, one district court circuit, one district court division, shall we say. Montana is the same, but not Illinois, not California, not New York, in fact, not Florida. So that's a little background on how the district courts got established. That's a little background on how the district courts got established, and they have expanded until this day, and they have expanded their power because humans are humans, folk. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're right or left. Human nature is human nature, and if you are given the opportunity to expand your power and expand your domain and your dominion and the limelight within your sphere of influence, most people are going to jump at the opportunity, particularly if it's against somebody they don't like or ideas they think are, shall we say, outside the bounds of their ideology. All right. You know, a lot of things have happened. All I'm going to say about this is to give you this history so you understand how the district courts got formed. But I want to put a bug in your ear. As they were formed, they can be unformed. As they were given power, their powers can be stripped. And what's happening at the district court level right now in slowing down the Make America Great Again, Make America First, which is critical if we're going to survive. I mean, this isn't just ideology. This is like, does America survive or not? That really falls to Congress. And, you know, they diddle and dither and take their, don't even get me started. I'll start foaming at the mouth. And while I'm talking about Congress, let me tell you, so right now the House of Representatives is 217 Republicans to 215 Democrats. I mean, this is a razor-thin mortgage. Razor-thin. And we have two special elections coming up beginning next week, April 1, folks. April 1. Time's up. There is no tomorrow. Florida 1 and Florida 6. A guy by the name of Randy Fine in Florida 1, and I think his name is Danaeus. It doesn't matter. He's a good red-blooded American who supports the MAGA agenda. And the Democrats are pouring money into these two races like you can't believe. Gee, big surprise. Can you imagine what would happen to the United States because the MAGA, Make America First movement is halted in its tracks less than 90 days into Trump's presidency by a Democratic House of Representatives? I want you to just think about that for a minute. I suggest, and we have it on the Take Action page, we have it on the recommended contribution page, we have it on our Facebook page. You better send some money, like today, when you hear this, to those campaigns, and there's several ways to do it. You can send it to the Republican folks who are going to split it up between the two campaigns, etc. Did you know, and I'm sorry, I forget which state, it was one of the Midwestern states, I think it was Pennsylvania. Did you know that there was a hotly contested race for the state Senate just last week? Same type of thing, I believe the state senator keeled over and had to be replaced, etc., which is governed by state law. This is in a plus 23 red. In other words, a district which is plus 23 red, plus 23 Republican. Did you know the Democrat won? That seat switched hands in Pennsylvania. This is last week, folks. Wake up. You know how happy you were when Trump was elected? You know how thrilled you are with his appointments? You know how mostly you are behind his policies? Imagine if all of that stops abruptly and pretty much permanently. I suggest you get off your butts and you send 10, 20, 50, whatever you need to do right now. Go to the Take Action page on the Right Side Radio. Google up the special elections, Republican donations, or whatever you need to do, and send some money right now. Additionally, April 1 is a huge election in Wisconsin. Remember, Wisconsin is a swing state. You're not going to get a Republican president without the swing states. And Wisconsin has been ruled with an iron fist by a Democratic Supreme Court, and not to the benefit of the United States or anybody who loves the Constitution, for the last 5 years. This is a great chance to restore at least parity and maybe a slight majority, conservative majority, on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. And they have ballot chasers on the ground right now. Same guy who won the Pennsylvania race for Trump, by the way. And he's terrific. And that's posted all over the website. It's on the Facebook page. Send them $20. The ballot chasers have to eat. They need a place to sleep. And this is the key to the Wisconsin race. And the Wisconsin judgeship race at the Supreme Court level on April 1, folks, could be key to the next election. So don't be out there going la-di-da, everything is wine and roses. It's not over. You know what happens when you stop driving the ball forward on the 1/2 yard line? You don't get the touchdown. You lose the game. So do it. Do it. for your country, for yourself, and for your family, and for your freedom. Let's do some international stuff right now, and we'll throw in a little mix of domestic too. First of all, Trump stripped the security Secret Service details from Hillary, Biden, and that whole cabal. Great. Let's save some money. Go Doge, go. In Canada, and all this ties into what the thoughts I'm going to bring you about the alternative to the peace, love, dove, China, you got this, Russia, you got this, United States, we got this scenario I've brought you. Carney, who is a globalist, is now in charge of Canada. Whether or not the Conservatives can defeat him in the upcoming elections is unknown. And in the interest of truth, Trump has stirred up a hornet's nest in Canada. I have friends up there. We used to have ranches up there. And even people who hate the government in Ottawa are not happy with Trump in the United States. Okay, everybody has national pride. So I don't know what's going to happen in those elections. But Carney, globalist that he is, and central banker that he is, oh, well, must be a coincidence. He has actually asked the European powers, France, England, the nuclear powers in Europe, for a protective nuclear umbrella in case the United States ever thinks about invading Canada. I'm really not making this up. It's wow. And he says he's going to govern when he's elected so that Canada suffers more years of left-wing socialist torture. The continuity with the programs of, as Elon calls him, girly boy Trudeau. Terrific. I feel sorry for you Canadians. You better start thinking up there. In the Congo and other African nations are being ripped apart by civil wars. And it really is nationalist versus globalist, communist versus nationalist. I mean, it's the same type of conflict you seeing here, but it's also fueled by, and I guess it is here too, greed, natural resources, the play of the big powers, China, Russia, and the United States, all of their secret services, all of their spy agencies getting in there and doing their kind of psyops, if you will, picking and arming and financing sides. The Congo has come to the United States and said, listen, this is a mess. We will let you take our natural resources, but you'll pay us if you send in troops or special forces and help us with this communist insurgency. Very interesting. Very interesting. And Africa, by the way, folks, is pretty key to what happens over the next 10, 20, 30 years on the planet Earth, because the next 10, 20, 30 years is going to be defined by resources. If you got them and you can ship them, listen to my show several days ago about choke points, maritime shipping. It's fascinating. If you got them and you can ship them, you're going to be okay. And if you don't have them and you can't ship them, you're done. Toast. Over. Bye-bye. All right. In Europe, Poland, Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, basically the Eastern Bloc of the European countries, have said they are no longer going to follow what's called the Ottawa Treaty, nothing to do with Canada, which forbids landmines being placed in battlefields or on national borders. In fact, they're going to mine the hell out of all their borders as protection against Belarus, a Russian puppet, and Russia. Great. That should be terrific. At the same time, Europe, the European powers, understanding finally that Trump is throwing them under the bus. And remember, the European powers were involved actively campaigning and financing and assisting the anti-MAGA forces in 2016. In the prosecution, right, it was MI6, folks, that came up with the Russia hoax to begin with, their operatives, right? Remember Steele and the dossier. And they were actively campaigning, financing, etc., the Kamala Harris campaign and the Joe Biden campaign in 2020, actually, Obama's third term campaign in 2020. You know, all the globalists stick together, birds of a feather. So Trump hates them. And I described to you in several of the past previous shows of the power that London holds as kind of the nest of the capitalists, kind of the center of the spider web of globalist thinking and the WEF mind pattern, right? World Economic Forum. And they finally realized that the United States is kind of kicking them to the curb. And that makes them realize that they got a big problem, and it's called Vladimir Putin and his country, Russia, not to mention China. And their other problem is they don't have any military to speak of. And a couple of them have some nuclear weapons. I think France has 50 or 80 nuclear weapons. Europe, England about the same. I think Italy has a few. I mean, some of the European powers have nuclear arms. And they are now literally going out, PSYOPs, beautiful PSYOPs style, as only the Europeans can do. They're going out and telling their populations to get prepared, and we're going to war. That's right, we're going to go to war with Russia. Well, I don't think any of the European powers can fight like Ukraine, have the heart of Ukraine or the guts of Ukraine. They certainly don't have the manufacturing capability. You know, a wind farm doesn't really power a munitions plant. And they don't have the numbers of men and women in their armed forces. And they have soft societies because they have coddled them from basically birth to grave. I mean, this is, and their economies are in shambles because of their, Green New Deal and other kumbaya deals. So that is a flashpoint. Europe itself has become a flashpoint. And Europe itself has become really an adversary. I wouldn't call it an enemy, but an adversary of the United States. And not through Trump's doing. They did it to themselves. He just recognized it and is taking steps to neutralize it. At the same time, we have this supposed 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine. It's not really a ceasefire, folks. It's really kind of an uneasy agreement between Russia and the United States to not do certain things for 30 days, like, not attack shipping, goes back to the choke point theory, in the Black Sea. Russia not to attack energy infrastructure in Ukraine. I mean, yeah, you can call it a ceasefire, but it's tenuous and it's very limited. Who knows what's going to happen there, particularly with Europe, beating the war drums. I mean, it's like the 60-pound weakling nerd with glasses coming up to you and you're 6'6" with 4-foot shoulders and saying, I'm going to kick your butt. Okay. Bring it on, baby. Bring it on. And we have the Mideast Summit. Now, it's being held in the Mideast for a reason, folks. The Mideast Summit, which was the birthplace of this so-called ceasefire, that was also a reason for the United States to meet with its Mideastern, I wouldn't call them allies. I wouldn't even call them friends. How about non-enemies? Saudi Arabia, Qatar, United Arab Emirates, etc. Okay, it's great. They were able to get a lot of diplomacy done on a lot of different fronts and have the guys in the cloak of meeting with Russia for Ukraine peace. It was actually brilliant. And in the meantime, the United States is flying and moving troops and armament and 6 of our B-1 stealth bombers. That is 1/3 of our entire B-1 bomber fleet to an island which is a forward post that would allow them to strike Iran. and Israeli is beating the war drums. And as you know, we literally, by arming Al-Qaeda, right? Wow. By arming Al-Qaeda, overthrew Basad in Syria, which opened up the air lanes for bombing runs by Israel over Iran. I mean, before that, they had to kind of fly in a big circular pattern, and, that takes away kind of all the stealth and surprise. No more. And Garcia, the island that these B-1s are on, along with other, like transport, fuel tankers, the whole 9 yards for a big offensive. They're all striking distance from Iran. And the attack on the Houthis was to further weaken Iran, right? Iran, over the last 4, 5, 6 months, over the last year, has seen their allies, in fact, their proxies, Hamas, pretty much decimated. Hezbollah, pretty much decapitated. And the Houthis now getting the hell bombed out of them by the United States. And Syria collapsed. Iran stands alone. And they keep beating the drums, I think, really stupidly, because it's bringing just the opposite effect, about how they are days away from a nuclear weapon. And it's been made very clear by Netanyahu and Trump that they will not be allowed to get a nuclear weapon. And of course, their movement toward nuclear weapons came from the Iran deal that that's right, Obama did. That's right. Oh, must have been just, what was he thinking? So you have that flashpoint ready to go. And then you have the Iranian-Russian Defense Pact. And then you have China, who gets 80%, that's 80%, of their fossil fuel supplies from Iran. What could possibly go wrong here, right? What could possibly go wrong? In the meantime, Russia has expelled the United Kingdom's diplomats from Russia, because the United Kingdom is like leading the warmonger pact in Europe. And Turkey, a NATO, you can't make this stuff up. It's like a spy novel. Turkey, Erdogan in Turkey, he needs a war to get more popular because they have 40% inflation, and he's not like the most liked government official in Turkey right now. And Turkey is literally the strongest army, the strongest military, a nuclear power in NATO, and the strongest in the Mideast. And Turkey they made it clear. They hate the Shiites. They are a Sunni Muslim nation. Iran is Shiite, as was Syria, as was Iraq. And Turkey has made known their geographical expansion wishes, shall we say. They've also made it clear that they think wiping Israel off the face of the earth is something that really needs to be done. Take all this stuff I'm bringing you, and there's more. We're going to go over it in the next show. And you begin to see the foundation for the alternative scenario to uneasy peace-love dove between China, Russia, and the United States, each with their sphere of influence. I'll leave it at that. The next show, we'll discuss it. In the meantime, you have a great next couple of days, Saturday and Sunday. Next show will be to you lickety-split, and keep the wind at your back. This is Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side Radio and the Cowboys Take.
Please remember, if you've missed any shows, just click on Show Archive and you'll find all of his shows. We look forward to seeing you here again next week for another episode of Reed Lance Rosenthal on the Right Side.